Hello and welcome to India's World. Last October, about 250 men, armed mostly with knives, slingshots and about 30 firearms, launched an attack on 3 police posts on Myanmar's northwestern border with Bangladesh. They killed 9 police officers and fled with about 50 guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The International Crisis Group, a Belgium-based NGO, in a report released last month said that the attacks were the handiwork of a new Islamic insurgent group called Haraka al-Yaqeen, or the Faith Movement. It claimed that the new Islamic extremist group, comprising Rohingya Muslims, had links in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Pakistan, Bangladesh and possibly India. The Rohingyas are a stateless minority in Buddhist-majority Myanmar. There have been clashes between Buddhists and Rohingyas over a long period of time. The worst riots were seen in 2012, which left 200 people dead and 150,000 Rohingyas homeless. They continue to live in refugee camps since then. Aung San Suu Kyi, the de facto leader of Myanmar, has been criticized internationally for doing little to prevent the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingyas. Last year, she announced that an advisory commission led by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan would look at possible solutions for the standoff with the Rohingyas. But nothing seems to have come out of that move. The situation of the Rohingyas is further complicated by the recent allegations of the emergence of an allegedly Islamic insurgent group among them. To discuss the persecution of the Rohingyas in Myanmar and whether it is driving them towards extremism, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Preet Malik. He has served as India's High Commissioner to Singapore, Tanzania, Seychelles, Malaysia and Brunei, and India's Ambassador to Bahrain, Cuba and Myanmar. We have with us Professor Baladas Ghoshal, an expert on Myanmar. He was Professor of Southeast Asia and Southwest Pacific Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He's been associated with various think tanks, including the Center for Policy Research, Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies, and Society for Indian Ocean Studies. We also have with us my old friend Ambassador Vivek Karju. He retired as a Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and was India's Ambassador in Afghanistan, Thailand, and Myanmar. I welcome you, gentlemen, to this discussion. Ambassador Preet Malik, let me begin with you. Why does Myanmar refuse to recognize that the Rohingyas have lived in the Arakan area for centuries, for several generations? What would you say are the root causes of the marginalization of the Rohingyas in Myanmar?
Well, the reality is that those who they consider non-Burmese have consistently been kept outside the citizenship of Myanmar or Burma earlier. And the Rohingyas are not an exception as far as that is concerned. This has been true of the way they do these things. But basic problem has been that as these two groups, the Arakan Rohingyas and the Arakan Buddhist groups, the Rakhains, have consistently been at each other's throats. And this has from time to time resulted in major communal problems in that area.
Okay. Professor Ghoshal, why have the rights of the Rohingyas eroded even under the current transitional democratic government, which is de facto headed by Aung San Suu Kyi, Nobel Peace Prize winner?
I think the main issue is the issue of legitimacy. Rohingyas are not really an ethnic group. It is a political construction. There were Muslims living in that region from 9th century. And in fact, there was no problem during that period because it was Arakan Kingdom. But the major part of migration took place from Bangladesh, that particular area, which was undivided Bengal, in the 20th century, along with the colonial powers under the British Burma during that period. But they are actually not an ethnic group. They are people of Bengali, they are Muslims of Bengali origin. I think one of the major historians...
All of them? Because I thought some of them were of Arab origin also in their history.
In fact, it is very difficult to give them one identity. In fact, even the historians, the Rohingya historians, when they talk about Rohingyas, it's very difficult to justify them as one particular group because they belong to various ethnic groups as well as a various social background. In fact, one of the most well-known historians of Rohingya, that Rakhine history, Benedict Rogers, he says that they are actually not an ethnic group, but of Bengali Muslims, of ethnic origin of Bengali Muslims. So if they claim themselves to be as Muslims all right, then of course there is no problem. But the problem is that they are actually claiming themselves as an ethnic group. And as you know, Burma is patterned along the ethnic sort of identities. All the states are known by their ethnic name. Now, if Rohingya becomes an ethnic state, that means they are also going to claim, I mean, they are recognized as an ethnic group, then they will also claim a state. And many of the Buddhists, Rakhine Buddhists, they fear that because that might turn into
the Rakhine
a more
state is itself a name that was given only a decade ago. I think it was the Arakan region earlier.
It was Arakan region, but ethnically, the people of that particular region are called the Rakhines.
Yeah.
I mean, the state was Arakan at that time because the British had done it, because of the Arakan region, I mean, because of the, not for the ethnic identity, but more because of the geographical sort of region.
Vivek, so they're not an ethnic minority. Is that enough to disenfranchise them? Which is what happened in 2015. They were not allowed to vote. An election that was celebrated the world over as the ushering in of democracy, Myanmar becoming an open society. It became an open society for everyone, a democratic society for majority of people in Myanmar. But these people lost their vote in 2015.
I think the fact is that Myanmar is a very complex society. For historical reasons, and unless one appreciates the historical nature of the Rohingya problem and places it in this context of the complexities of the ethnic situation in Myanmar.
Would that justify disenfranchising the entire population?
Please, I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm only trying to analyze it.
Okay.
You see, in Myanmar, the majority or the plurality are the Burmans, the ethnic Burmans. And the ethnic Burmans, the army was actually a Burman army.
Yeah.
Aung San, the great hero, was a Burman. But they felt that they'd been ousted out of power by the British. And they actually were systematically kept out of the power structures, and the British promoted the other ethnicities that were in the hills. The plains were Burmans, largely Burmans, Little Shan, etc., Burmans. And that xenophobia, and I'm using the word advisedly, which is sort of part of the personality of the Burmans, is now reflected in their reactions in Rakhine or Arakan, you can call it what you will. And I tend to think that Aung San Suu Kyi is being perhaps too harshly criticized. It's not as if she doesn't recognize the need for human rights protection, but she is also a product of this situation. And her real problem is also that her commitment to the Burman cause, as was her father's, and he was assassinated, mind you, has always been a little suspect. So she has to establish her credentials with the Burmans, which
at the cost of the
includes the army.
Rohingyas. At the cost of the Rohingyas.
No, not at the cost of the Rohingyas, but she has to handle what she calls the sensitive issue sensitively.
Okay, quickly, sir.
No, sir. Look, there is a fundamental issue here. The difference is this, that during the British colonial period, what is known as the frontier areas, which are basically the ethnic tribes, were brought in as a separate entity. They were not treated as fundamentally a part of the Burma. And that is a problem that has consistently been maintained. The Rohingya problem is a little more complex.
We will discuss this further, but I need to take a break at this point. I'll come back to you after the break. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the allegations or the possibilities of growth of extremism in Myanmar's Rohingya Muslim population in the Rakhine state. I interrupted you before you went to the break. You were saying
what I was trying to say is that it's not only the position against the Rohingyas. You have to recognize that there is a communal problem out there, which is an anti-Muslim problem. So
but it's not an anti-Christian problem against the Kachins and the Karens and others.
No, it's an anti-Muslim problem, which is being promoted also by the hardline Buddhist forces within Myanmar.
No, what I'm trying to ask you is why don't they promote anti-Christian sentiment by that logic? Because the entire sort of crescent surrounding the Burman plains is ethnic groups who are largely Christian.
Look, if you look at it carefully, the Muslims are considered as more aggressive within the system. And as you began this process itself by suggesting that there is a fundamentalist movement that is developing.
ICG is saying that, I'm not saying
No, I'm saying you referred to it.
Yes.
Now the fact of the matter is, it's hardly surprising because there has been a very staunch anti-Muslim position. I can even go to the extent of saying that even during the slaughter period, there were mosques that were being destroyed. The Holy Quran was being maltreated and in fact even thrown aside. So this is a deep-seated thing.
Okay. Professor Ghoshal, what do you think are the implications of this allegation of this group called Haraka al-Yaqin emerging amongst the Rohingyas, and how would it complicate Yangon's policy towards the Rohingyas?
I think Ambassador Kardzu had mentioned about the problems that Aung San Suu Kyi is facing. I think the international community and the human rights groups are also to be blamed for using the term Rohingya again and again, and that creates actually problem for the Myanmar government.
But doesn't it? But if the people themselves call themselves Rohingyas,
No.
what is the harm in calling? If
They
you
call
call yourself a Bengali, if I call you a Bengali, why should you get upset?
This is the problem, because they are calling themselves Rohingya in order to highlight the fact that they belong to a particular ethnic community.
Okay.
That's why they are saying. You see, the problem with this, that this repeated mention of Rohingya by the international community validates the narrative of essentializing a Muslim identity in Rakhine state. And that is what the Burmese, the Rakhine Buddhists are afraid of.
But what
I think
happens now
they
if an extremist group comes up? What happens?
You have to accept the fact that the Burman government also recognizes them as Rohingya. They are referring to them as Rohingya.
No,
are
they call
not.
them Bengalis.
They call them Bengalis.
No. They say they are Bengalis. They identify them with what is Bangladesh today, but they do not consistently maintain that they are not Rohingya. I have been to that area where they call them Rohingya.
Okay, let me take this to Vivek now. Vivek, how will the emergence of Haraka al-Yaqin complicate how Yangon deals with these people who call themselves Rohingyas?
I think it's unfortunate. Perhaps it's inevitable given the way jihadists are evolving all across the world. It's inevitable that...
So you will blame jihadis and not the policies of Yangon?
I'm not blaming... I'm not at the moment casting blame. I'm again saying I'm trying to understand this.
Okay.
So first of all, it is inevitable that they'll get involved in what they see as the persecution of Muslims. For them, I think it's not the Rohingya identity which is at play, but it is their Muslimness which they feel is being persecuted. Now, it will harden the Burman sentiment.
Will it lead to more violence?
It will lead to more violence in the sense that it will make Aung San Suu Kyi's position far more difficult because she has an army to deal with, and let's not forget that the army still controls the security apparatus of the Myanmar state. And the last point is that it might even complicate things for countries like Malaysia, which have been in the forefront of trying to find a resolution of this by giving the Rohingyas a place under the Myanmar sun, because no one wants actually to take in Rohingya refugees anymore.
Including Malaysia. They blocked the sea routes. Yeah. You were saying something.
In fact, the Mount Tai incident, when the 9 policemen were killed, I was in Yangon at that time. 1 week before that I went, and I spent about 2 more weeks after that. And I interviewed a lot of Burman people.
Yeah.
He said, so long the Rohingyas claim themselves as Muslims, there will be no problem. But if they claim themselves as Rohingyas,
Yeah.
you know, that is where the real suspicion among the Buddhists. And the second thing is that, you know, that particular Mount Tai incident, 1 week before that, if you read the newspaper of Myanmar during that period, you will see that even many Burmans talked about political reconciliation and they were prepared to give support to Aung San Suu Kyi. But the moment, you know, that Mount Tai incident took place, and interestingly, a Bangladeshi newspaper for the first time reported about these particular extremist groups. And immediately, the stance of the army changed.
changed.
And the Commander-in-Chief gave a statement where he said, no compromise.
Okay. Ambassador Malik, we've heard the diagnosis of the problem, but do you think that the Myanmar government has any overarching political strategy of how to deal with this conflict in the Rakhine state?
Well, I think the normal practice there would be to try and find some kind of a solution to it.
But after this incident that Professor Ghoshal is talking about, the army went and burnt several villages
Yes.
of Rohingyas. I mean, that's, I don't know what kind of strategy is
Well,
that of
as you
collective
know,
punishment.
the army has its own position on this, and they have never hesitated to take action where they think that the security of the nation is at stake.
Disproportionate action without making any distinction between civilians and militants.
But they have always done that. It's not just against the Rohingya. Whenever it has a situation has arisen where they felt that the security of the state was at stake, they have taken brutal action.
But is there a comprehensive strategy, political strategy of dealing with the situation?
But it's pretty obvious that there isn't as yet.
Okay.
They're still trying to struggle to find some kind of a resolution. But as Professor Ghoshal made that distinction, I think that is a very important one. That the Rohingya nomenclature will have to disappear. And I don't know whether that is going to be easy to do.
All right. We need to take a break at this point again. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the possible growth of extremism in Myanmar's Rohingya population in its Rakhine state bordering Bangladesh. Professor Ghoshal, you wanted to say something?
Actually, if at all anyone can resolve that problem, it is Aung San Suu Kyi. And in fact, she is quite aware of the problems. And she has also given a statement where she did say that the Rohingyas need to be, at least the Muslims need to be accommodated into the political process by giving them citizenship or some kind of things of that sort.
We will see whether that
But the problem is
happens or
that
not.
she has to be given time.
Okay.
Because she is the one only, she has certain legitimacy in terms of approaching these problems.
Okay.
But if international community and others push her too much, it will be very difficult. She will be abandoned by the Buddhists.
Let me ask you something slightly different, Vivek. Is it right to designate this extremist group Haraka al-Yaqeen as the ICG, International Crisis Group, has done, calling it an Islamic extremist group and not an extremist Rohingya group? Because this group is not asking for a caliphate under the Islamic State or under Al-Qaeda. They're asking for the rights of people who consider themselves Myanmaris, saying that give us citizenship rights, give us our basic rights. But the moment you call them an Islamic extremist group, you link them with Al-Qaeda, you link them with the Islamic State, and you suggest it's a conspiracy being hatched outside Myanmar for other nefarious and millennial purposes, while it is limited to saying give us our rights.
I think it's not as simple as that. For the simple fact is that the Haraka al-Yaqeen has linkages and has patrons and has inspiration from the broader Islamist jihadist movement. And in fact support. Without that support,
Where
there
is
will
the
be
evidence?
nowhere. I think the very fact that you have Rohingyas mobilization in the wider community where they are. There are 400,000 in Saudi Arabia, for instance. It is indication enough of these linkages. But my one point that I'd like to mention, I'm somewhat pessimistic about an early resolution of this issue.
Okay.
For two reasons. One, that the Myanmar army is not an easy army to change. And second, the Buddhist Sangh in Myanmar is a very aggressive Sangh.
Ambassador Malik, in saying that, you know, there's so many Rohingyas in Saudi Arabia, there are quite a few in India, they are also in Malaysia. that because they exist there as refugees, therefore they must have Islamic links, is, I think, a kind of projection which is really not valid on the ground, because I have not seen evidence up to now. The International Crisis Group draws very tenuous links between Haraka al-Yaqin and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. What is that link? That the head of this organization, a chap called Abu Ammar, he was born of parents who had migrated to Karachi, who subsequently migrated to Saudi Arabia. This is the link. Besides this, no other evidence is given. So how fair is it to say that this group has links with international jihadist groups? It draws inspiration from there, because that inspiration then should reflect in this group chasing the internationalist goals of Islamic State or of Al-Qaeda.
I think it's an issue also linked to the resource factor. The Rohingyas as a group, I'm using it very advisedly as a term, do not have any kind of real stake in terms of the kind of resource base that would give them the strength to assert their position. This is one of the...
So they went with slingshots and bows and arrows. So where are the resources?
No, this is what I'm saying. They do not have a resource base. This is one of the fundamental issues that one will observe if you go into that area itself. That they would be exploited by jihadist groups is certainly not something that we should be unaware of.
They have expressed sympathy. They have expressed sympathy for their causes, but there's no evidence of any operational activity by these groups in that area.
After all, you had the problem that took place in Bodh Gaya, and it was attributed directly to the Rohingyas. So it is not that you can, state that they are not involved. There is, and it is understandable. They are under pressure, and it will not be surprising if there are groups who are willing to exploit that pressure to gain their own objectives. But the fact is that this kind of disruption that has taken place in that area is one that you cannot ignore from the security angle.
Absolutely, but it needs to be addressed politically first, I think.
It does.
But Professor Ghoshal, what is the future? Let's assume that there is an Islamic insurgency growing in Rohingya areas, that is in the Arakan state. What is its future? Because all such groups need a hinterland to retreat to. They need a strategic depth, that if something happens there, if they're chased out by the Myanmar army, they can retreat to safe havens. Now, Bangladesh is the only place they can come to. Bangladesh is very harsh on them. One knows the kind of camps they're running in Cox's Bazar and elsewhere. And Bangladesh itself is very hard on its own extremists. So what is the future of this kind of an insurgency if it exists?
It's true that Bangladesh is harsh on these extremist groups. But in Bangladesh also is experiencing a radicalization of Islamic things. And I think they're facing that problem. And if you really look at it from a broader regional perspective, you see in Malaysia, in Indonesia, everywhere the extremist groups are increasing their strength. And in fact, one of the reasons why Najib had to give a statement about the Rohingya issue is the pressure from within. And he was afraid. In fact, you speak to any of the Malaysians today, they're really worried about this kind of extremist groups. They never talked about Islam before with anyone else other than a Muslim. But now they are really worried about these extremist groups. So if you look at it from a sort of regional perspective, there is a growing strength of these Islamic groups. And I think Bangladesh itself, like for example, I said when that particular incident took place, it was the Bangladeshi newspaper which reported. And the link with Bangladesh.
Reporting doesn't mean that they're party to it, but my question was there's no hinterland, but you're saying that they can find...
itself could be.
Let me ask you this, Vivek, and you can say whatever else you want to say. Does India have to worry because of Rohingya extremism? Because we have quite a few Rohingya refugees in India. About 5,100 Rohingya refugees are in Jammu alone. And they are in Mewat in Haryana, they're in Hyderabad. In Delhi, they have a concentration in Madanpur Khadar, Kalindi Kunj, Shaheen Bagh. And ICG report does say, without giving any evidence, that Haraka al-Yaqin has links not only with Pakistan, Bangladesh, but it says possibly in India. So what kind of a security situation could it create for India?
I'll come to that and I'll answer that.
We don't have much time.
No, just two sentences. If you want to look at a comparison, see the issues of violence, really, I don't like using the word Islamic violence, but Muslim violence in southern Thailand, which is indigenous, which still doesn't have connections outside to this extent. I think here Rohingyas are different in the sense that there are these connections. As far as India is concerned, I think we've got to keep a very, very close eye on this, because we've maintained a silence, and I think prudently we've maintained a silence, but that is being interpreted as lack of sympathy for persecution and the violation of human rights, because to an extent the violation of human rights is continuing.
Okay, so we've really run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, Ambassador Vivek Karju, Professor Baladas Ghoshal, Ambassador Preet Malik, for participating in this extremely complex issue and opening out the various layers of this problem for all our viewers. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.